And welcome to UnPolitical Politics with Cousin Niki. I am joined by Ms. Tanja Thompson and Mr. Aubery Glencamp. Both are breast cancer survivors. Thank you all for coming to the show. A little bit about Ms. Tanja Thompson is Tanja Thompson, twice breast cancer survivor, author of What to Expect When You Weren't Expecting Breast Cancer, and contributor to I've Been Diagnosed Now What? Courageously Fighting Cancer in the Face of Fear. Ms. Thompson is a 25-year Air Force veteran, and using the strengths learned from 25 years of active military service combined with surviving her ordeals, Ms. Thompson founded the Breast Cancer Move Foundation organization, which is a 501(c). She is also the CEO of the Transformational Resolution Group, which specializes in coaching individuals to work with themselves to transcend the traumatic events that have stifled their lives. Ms. Tanja has been married for 28 years to Philip Thompson, and they have 3 wonderful children, Artisha, Taylor, and Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
And a granddaughter, Faith. Mr. Aubery Glencamp is a male breast cancer survivor, which is very rare. He lives in Georgia with his lovely wife and 4-year-old daughter. And Mr. Glencamp will get more in depth about his story and his struggles and what he was able to overcome. So we will be right back to start our interview, and thank you all for coming. See you in a second.
Unpolitical Politics, hosted by Cousin Niki. It's the king of the zoo, Young Ward, yeah. Like, comment, subscribe. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. You know the vibes, ayy. You know the vibes, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy.
And we are back. Before we get into it, we're going to go into a quick 2-minute breast cancer video. This focuses more on female breast cancer. So we will be right back in 2 minutes.
Breast cancer. 2 words that paint a picture of fear and isolation. But together, we can paint a different picture, a picture of hope, strength, and courage. Together, we can take action to fight this disease, no matter how big or small. Every action counts. What's yours?
My action is being there for my father since my stepmother passed away from breast cancer.
My action is to support my friend who recently had a breast cancer scare.
Mon action est que je fais du sport tous les jours.
To learn how to be the happiest and healthiest person that I can be.
في أكتوبر رح أدرس البنكربن طول الشهر وأعمل فحص طبي لسرطان الثدي.
Give my wife all the time she needs to be with her friend who just got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Teaching women how to do self-examinations in hospitals, in shelters.
This is our action.
We put this to the Instagram with hashtag BCA Strength to share this campaign.
To never forget, my mother is a survivor.
Cada año yo me hago el examen del mammogram.
I've strengthened my body through fitness and healthy eating, and I've strengthened my mind by being around the people that I love and care about. That's how I'm taking action.
Ich trage die pinke Schleife, auf die Vorsorge vom Brust.
Something's going
Schleife, auf die Vorsorge vom Brustkrebs aufmerksam zu machen.
Our action is to be there for our family members while they battle cancer.
I'm personally going to make sure that all of my friends and family
own high risks with breast cancer because they're everything. Right, girls?
My action is being here, being alive, because I am a survivor.
My action is getting a mammogram every year on my birthday and encouraging women around the world to do the same. Now it's your turn to show us how you're taking action. Go to
That's me doing that.
Hashtag BCA Strength to share your action by posting a message, photo, or video. Every action counts. What's yours?
Tanja, tell us your story, please.
Hi. So again, my name is Tanja Thompson, and it's interesting that when I was diagnosed, it was back in 2005. And in 2005, there wasn't a whole lot about breast cancer. I remember feeling pain in my left breast. And I remember at the time my youngest son was just a little bit over 2 to 3 years old. And I remember nursing him. And I remember the feeling of when you express milk manually. And I went to the doctor just because I thought that I was feeling sick, that I was tired, exhausted. I'm thinking that they're just going to give me some, as in the military, I'm sure, Cousin Niki, you remember vitamin N, which is Motrin. I'm thinking that is what they was going to give me. But just prior to that, 14 months prior to my diagnosis, I had a baseline. I was only 40 years old when I had my baseline, and my baseline was totally negative. So, you get that letter in the mail saying, hey, there's nothing there. So the doctor, when she looked at my record, she's like, well, Ms. Thompson, you don't have a history of breast cancer. You are under 50 years old. And this is what I remember her saying. She said, well, it's not going to cost us anything. So she sent me to the breast center to get a mammogram. Now, if anyone knows that way back then, you didn't have all these natural things. So I was probably just coming from work or something. So I had deodorant under my arms. So the test kept coming back that there was something wrong. And I remember sitting there and it's like, we can't get a clear picture of your breast. You probably have deodorant and that's probably what we're seeing. So we need for you to come back and get another test. I came back. She said, don't wear any deodorant. Don't wear any lotion. Don't wear anything. So I remember going back to the doctor, going back to the center and getting a mammogram. That's like, okay, we got a clear mammogram now. I remember getting a phone call, and it wasn't unusual for doctors to call you, especially being in the military. And she's like, listen, I need for you to come in for your results. And I said, well, I'm going on travel. It's spring break. I really don't have time right now. She said, well, come in. And I remember when I was sitting there in the office and I was in uniform, and if you've never heard those words before, when you hear them for the first time, it's like Thor's hammer has hit you in your chest.
Wow.
So when she said, Miss Thompson, and maybe she said Sergeant Thompson, you have breast cancer. At that point, I went deaf. I didn't hear anything that she said after that. And that was the start of my journey as far as being a breast cancer survivor. So I found out, and what was so ironic about it was that they were questioning their tests to reason why I had so many tests, because the breast cancer had ravaged throughout both of my breasts. In 14 months, it was throughout both of my breasts. I had HER2 positive. And I'm from the Midwest, and in the Midwest, they have shotguns, right? So it was the equivalent to a buckshot. Anyone knows about buckshot, it's a spread out effect. And that's how the cancer was in both of my breasts. So there was no lumpectomy. Where there was a cell, and you know how they try to clear the margins, she said, by the time we go into another margin, there is more cancer. So I end up having a bilateral mastectomy right off the bat. So there was no trying to save the tissue. They took all of the tissue. They took the nipples. They took everything. Fortunately, it wasn't in my lymph nodes. So they took the first set of sentinel nodes, and fortunately, it had not spread from that point. So that's how I found out. I was oblivious.
You know, if you can explain to us what I think you said a double something.
Bilateral, double mastectomy.
Can you explain to us what that is?
So what a double mastectomy is that when the doctors have realized that your cancer is so spread out through both of your breasts, they take all of your breast tissue. So they took all of my breast tissue. They took half of my skin on both sides. So when I woke up, I was flat chested. So there was no trying to save skin. There was no of that trying to save tissue. So they took everything. They took the areola. So when I say everything, I was completely flat chested. They took the areola, they took the nipples, they took everything. So a true double mastectomy or a bilateral mastectomy is when they take everything. There's nothing there. There's nothing left other than just that tissue that that's makes you flat.
Oftentimes they tell us that breast cancer, when they ask you, during different questionnaires, does cancer run in your family? Does it run in your family?
No one in my family had breast cancer.
Wow.
So think about it. Back in 2005, breast cancer wasn't anything that we even talked about as African Americans. And if someone had it, you really didn't know about it. The only person that I knew that had breast cancer back then was a girlfriend of mine who was also in the military, because I was active duty. And just think about the internet was just coming out. So there wasn't where you could, like you have now, so just a flood of information. You can look at journals, MD Doc, Cancer Network, cancer organizations. You didn't have any of that back then. So when I first heard those words, it was a death sentence for me, because the only thing that you equated cancer with was death. So I knew that in my mind initially that it was a death sentence, that I was going to die from breast cancer.
And here you are all these years later. Who do you attribute your strength to?
I wouldn't say it's a who. I would say that it's God. It's my faith. As I mentioned earlier, I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And if anything, if you know anything about the Midwest, it's the Bible Belt, right? So I was born and raised in a Pentecostal church, a holiness church. And I tell people, they're like, well, what is a holiness church? I say it's hellfire and damnation, because if you don't do right, then God's going to punish you, and you're going to go to hell, and you're going to die by fire. And so for me, I leaned on my faith the first time and the second time. If it wasn't for my faith in God, I would have stayed down in that rabbit hole of depression and despair, where I didn't even tell people that I had breast cancer. I lived in shame for 5 years, or maybe even for 5 years. I lived in shame. I didn't wear pink. No one even knew that I had breast cancer because I didn't talk about it. And the reason I didn't talk about it is because of the stigma that goes along with it. Even though I had a wonderful support group, but still that stigma is there, that you've done something wrong, that God is punishing you, and that's how come you have breast cancer. And I know this because I lived it, and I lived it because, and in living it, I didn't tell people. I didn't wear pink. No one knew. Even when I when I left for those 3 months from Reconstruction, and mind you, I was active duty at the time. I told my colleagues, I said, if you tell anybody and I happen to die on the operating table, I'm going to come and haunt you in your dreams. And they's like, well, how you tell me I have breast cancer and you're going to come and haunt me at the same time? Because that's just how I felt about it. I was ashamed. I didn't want anybody to know. And only those that were in my close-knit group, those are the only ones that knew. And even with my husband, he was like, oh, there's a breast cancer event, Susan Komen and this, that, and the other. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And that's how I lived for 5 years until the second time. Because see, the thing is, the first time I didn't have chemo and I didn't have radiation. So I could hide. Mm-hmm. I didn't have that look of a breast cancer patient, a breast cancer survivor. Only thing that was and I immediately, once they realized all the cancer was gone, let's say all the cancer was gone, because it couldn't have been gone if it came back a second time, right? I immediately had reconstruction. So I like to tell, and I know Aubery, like you say, you're married. So I tell people I went from B's to C's. So I got an upgrade out of it. But even with that, still it wasn't like it was something that people could actually see, because I didn't have that sunken in look. I didn't lose my hair. I didn't have to go through radiation. And that was the standard of care back in 2005 when I was diagnosed the first time.
Speaking of Aubery, we're going to transition to something that a lot of us did not know about. I think do you remember the TV show Oz? Mm-hmm. If you watch Oz, there was an episode, maybe a few episodes, where one of the inmates had breast cancer. And that was the first time I had ever heard of male breast cancer. Mm. And then sometime later, watching Nip Tuck, there was an episode about a man having breast cancer. And again, it was such an anomaly that no one really, knew. You never heard of it. So we're going to move on to this next video. It's about a 6-minute video. I may cut it short if it starts to lag and do what I did with the last video, but here it is. This is a segment from the show The Doctors.
Did you know that men can get breast cancer? This year in the U.S., it's estimated that 2,670 men will be diagnosed and close to 500 will die from the disease. Men are at a much lower risk, but breast cancer does not discriminate.
Men get breast cancer. In 2007, I was first diagnosed with breast cancer. In September of 2015, we found out that the cancer not only came back again, but that it had spread. and that I was now metastatic. They did notice some growth in the I'm feeling great. There's always that tinge of anxiety. The key is allowing yourself to be afraid. These 10 years have been...
Yeah,
Michael is here today along with our good friend and colleague, Dr. Frida Lewis Hall, Chief Patient Officer of Pfizer. And Michael, what initially, if I may...
was told then that it was breast cancer, and also found out that I was the carrier of the BRCA2 gene.
Men with the BRCA2 gene who have been identified as having an inherited mutation in the BRCA2 gene have about a 6% chance of developing breast cancer over the course of their lifetime. Now, this is much higher. So, family history matters. The risk of breast cancer increases if you have a blood relative who's had it. Age matters. And although breast cancer can strike men at any age, it usually happens between 60 and 70. There are also some other risk factors: obesity, certain testicular conditions, liver disease, and heavy drinking.
And here's a question we get asked about this disease. How do men get breast cancer when they don't have breasts?
Let's set the record straight. Tissue and milk ducts. Now, in females, hormones stimulate the development of full breasts, and in men, they stay small and flat. But the important thing to note here is that men do have breast tissue, which means they can get breast cancer.
Infiltrating ductal carcinoma, or IDC, is the most common type of breast cancer when it comes to men. IDC does start. Most male breast cancers start relatively close to the nipple. Michael mentioned his warning sign was a lump near his nipple. Dr. Frida, can we talk about some other symptoms to look out for?
So absolutely, you want to watch out for thickening of the breast tissue and also changes in the skin that covers. That is a warning sign that you should call your doctor right away. And then, Michael, you mentioned another common symptom.
Yeah, I noticed that my left nipple had inverted, which means turning inward.
And Michael, unfortunately, your breast cancer came back and spread to other areas of your body. Breast cancer can metastasize and also spread to lymph nodes. Another important fact about breast cancer, men have a higher mortality rate than women do.
So this could be due to a lack of awareness in screening. If a man doesn't think that a lump is breast cancer, then he may be diagnosed at a later stage. One thing that I should mention is that for men who are identified 35 years and older that have a BRCA mutation, they should be screened at their yearly exam for breast cancer, and they should learn how to do breast self-exams.
Michael.
I'm going to play a little more and then I'm going to...
I do believe that there is, because still so many people typically think that this disease only happens to women.
And you've been through so much. Has there been something that's helped you along the way?
I am so grateful for the fact that I have wonderful friends and family who support me every day. I also have my partner, Tim, who is not afraid of the fact that I'm living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer.
I'm going to stop it right there. And I read somewhere, Aubery, where it said by the time breast cancer is discovered in a man, he's already at stage 3. Walk us through how you found out.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you both for your service as well. So I found out in 2016. I was in the best shape of my life at the time. I had lost a bunch of weight. And it happened to be Valentine's Day, and I was laying flat on my back, and my wife happened to rub on the left side of my chest, and she was like, "What is this bump?" And standing up, I couldn't feel it. It just happened to be that right position where she was able to feel it. And once she felt it, it became something that I was self conscious of. I immediately called my doctor the next day. Went in on that Friday. He checked me out and he was like, you've lost a lot of weight. It's probably nothing but fatty tissue or, something minor. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Um, and, he told me basically live my life. We would set me up for a mammogram or something further down the line. But again, just, don't worry about it. Doesn't seem like anything serious. So fast forward probably 5 weeks, I was called in from the women's clinic or women's center. Went in and with my name being Aubery, it's also unisex, so they thought I was a female when they called me back. And they basically told me, all the women went in, they got in their nice robes and, getting their mammograms, and they were like, we don't know what to do with you, just sit in the hallway for now. And, and I, at that moment, I was sitting there by myself, thinking about what is this, and I applaud you, ladies, for the mammogram process and being pushed and smushed and all of that. I got my experience with that. They did find something and asked me to come back a week later for a biopsy. Had the biopsy done, and almost like Miss Thompson, instead of them calling me to the office, they basically told me I was at work. He said, "I'm sorry to inform you that you have stage 2 breast cancer, and I'm also HER2 positive as well." So something that the video pointed out about the genetic testing and all of that, I didn't have any of that in my family as far as breast cancer. Similar to you, Cousin Niki, the only other person I heard that had breast cancer was Richard Roundtree, Shaft. Um, so outside of him, it wasn't something that was in my mind or ever thought that it was something that I would have. And through genetic testing, it proved that I didn't have any of the genes either. So, it just kind of came out of nowhere. And part of my treatment, I did get a double mastectomy as well, just to make sure. Well, not make sure, because even with, as Ms. Thompson pointed out, even with a double mastectomy, it can still come back. But just to kind of reduce that risk. So nipples and all of that stuff was gone, and I didn't do reconstructive surgery because I just didn't need to for my sake. And that's kind of how it started my journey. So I did chemo as well as surgery and chemo as well.
Were there a lot of male support groups, or were you able to find any support groups that was really concentrated on the male population versus having to probably integrate yourself with women's support groups, if there were any at that time where you were?
So during the time, I didn't see any. I'm a big researcher, so when I was diagnosed, I was on YouTube, trying to see different videos, what surgery is going to be like, what chemo is going to be like, all the different stages, just so I had prepared for it. And I didn't see a lot of males on there, and I even made it up in my mind that during this process, I was going to start a YouTube channel, just to kind of help males that are also going through the process, just to know how it is and know that they're not alone. I actually didn't know or come into contact with the Male Breast Cancer Coalition until after a professor of mine that worked for American Cancer Society wrote an article on me. And then that article was shared, and I got interviews and different things like that. And then that's when the Male Breast Cancer reached out to me, and it's this whole organization of nothing but male breast cancer survivors. Tight-knit community that's basically helping to change the stigma associated with breast cancer, trying to get rid of the pink wash and make sure it's more inclusive of males, and helping with pharmaceutical companies to make sure that they include males in their research. So there's definitely things out there, but during my time of going through it, I had no clue.
Where do you get your strength from, especially at that time?
Definitely faith. For sure. And, one thing to point out is this wasn't my first rodeo. I had open heart surgery when I was 19, defibrillator placed in. And, I just kind of, when I was diagnosed, I saw it as an opportunity. And I just said, God, if this is what I'm going to go through, I just hope that I can help save other lives and that you can use me in that way. Also wasn't a father at the time. And they told me with chemo and all of that, I would become sterile possibly. And I need to go to a fertility clinic. I never got a chance to go to a fertility clinic. And 2 days before my surgery, we found out my wife was pregnant. So it's my miracle baby, and that's how I see her. So today she is 4 years old.
That is great. Tanja, your foundation. Tell us a little bit about it, please.
My the Breast Cancer Mood Foundation is my way. One is my way of giving back, and giving back in that no one has to go through what I went through, and that is feeling shameful and not knowing about your breast cancer diagnosis. Early detection is the key. Early detection saved my life twice. So when I go out and speak, when I go out and I drive my car, it's all about early detection. So I actually bought a white beetle bug car and I transformed it into a pink car of affirmation. So I do a lot of speaking. As you mentioned, I have a book. I do a lot on social media. I have a couple of Facebook pages, and on those pages, I talk about breast cancer. One of the things I think is, October is 31 days, but those of us that are breast cancer survivors, breast cancer warriors, breast cancer patients, we live with breast cancer 365 days of the year. And because it's always a thought that it's either it's going to come back, did they get it all? So it's every single day of our lives. And my goal is for women to get your mammogram. October is that time of the month that if you haven't had your mammogram, go schedule your mammogram. Understand that you're not alone, that it's not a death sentence, that there's a lot of support groups, just like Mr. Glencamp mentioned that, when he was diagnosed, it wasn't a lot. When I was diagnosed, it wasn't a lot. But, now you hear more and more people talking about breast cancer. And I also am an advocate. And so during certain times of the year, I will go and lobby my congressperson, the Senate, and talk about the different things that, as breast cancer survivors, breast cancer patients, what we have to go through. One, reference to co-pays, out of network pays. For an example, as I was in the military, so mine was covered, but even for Aubery and let's say women, sometimes those doctors are not within your network. So you're, as a patient, you're getting an extra bill. Well, you're already under stress. You already have all these medical bills that's coming your way. So we lobby. One of the things we did, and I think it was for 2020 or 2019, that those providers stay within network, so that individuals that are going through breast cancer, that's going through reconstruction, that's going through chemo, that all of that stays within network. So I do a lot of lobbying, I do a lot of talking, and really, really getting out the word about breast cancer.
Aubery, you're in Georgia, so what is it that you're into as far as advocating for male breast cancer?
So for me is, I've definitely been blessed as far as opportunities to speak all across. I've been on the BBC network. I actually I was on a panel with Matthew Knowles last year, who also was diagnosed with breast cancer. We kind of had difference of opinions when it came to the naming of it. He
likes chest cancer.
He likes chest cancer, and that kind of goes against that, that stigma of having, being afraid or having that ego that we don't have breast tissue for some reason, and chest cancer is completely different than breast cancer. So just different things like that. I was on Good Morning America earlier this week. I had a clip on there. And like I said, just seeing my story shared across the globe, across the pond, and all of that type of thing, just making sure that I continue to push forward and make sure people know I wear a mask that has the Male Breast Cancer Coalition, and people see it and ask me questions about it, so I think just that homegrown deep root, just talking to different people and sharing stories and opening people's eyes to the fact that men can get this disease as well.
Tanja, tell us about your books and where they can purchase them.
So both of my books, if you go to my website, and it's www.tanjathompson.com, you can purchase a book. And my book, the What to Expect What You Wasn't Expecting Breast Cancer, is my journey with breast cancer. So it's in a journal type format, because again, there wasn't no pictures. There was no, people that looked like me that had breast cancer. So I felt that it was important that I write a book that really illustrated us as African American, and especially, African American women, because typically we are diagnosed later. What African American women are 40%, and now the number is actually going up. I don't know if it's because of COVID that women are waiting longer to get their mammograms, but the number is rising. The latest I've seen is 42% that African American women have they have a higher chance of dying, and more so if they're over 50 years old. And the thing is, a lot of times people don't realize that every 29 seconds a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer. Men's statistics is 1 in 1,000, women are 1 in 1,800. So, you get a group of women together, if you have 16, 2 of them are liable to get breast cancer. Just the thought of that is just staggering. And for many, it's very scary. So both of those books, like I mentioned, are on my website.
All right. Well, I think we're about closed out, but I do like to do a little trivia.
Can I mention one extra?
Absolutely.
Actually tomorrow, which is Saturday, I'm hosting the it's a virtual breast cancer tutu event, and it's actually free, and is on Eventbrite. And if any of your listeners, or even Aubery, if you would like to, or Cousin Niki, if you would like to participate, I can definitely send you guys the information, and your audience also your information. And it's a tea, so it's 9:00 in the morning, and I have a host of survivors, but also how it affects the family. So actually, my son at the time was 5 and 15 when I was diagnosed. So he's going to talk about from his perspective. We have an oncologist, and we have an internal medicine doctor also that's also going to talk about, breast cancer in the African American community, the risk factors, and, a whole host of things that, we don't hear and that we don't talk about. And also I have wonderful sponsors. So for breast cancer survivors and patients, they will be getting a free gift.
Since you mentioned about how it affects families, Aubery, how did your family react to the news? I know Tanja said she really didn't tell anybody the first time around, but how did it hit your family like a wrecking ball, or how?
I don't think it hit them like a wrecking ball because of my battles. Like I said, with open heart before, so to them, they knew I could handle it for sure. But I think it hit my mom a little bit harder than anybody else. My wife was obviously nervous, and then as we went through the process, she had her own thing to deal with, as she was growing our daughter in her belly. So They were very supportive though. And the one thing I did mention, and I have mentioned in other interviews, is, something I told my family was, if you're gonna cry, don't cry around me. If I'm doing okay and I'm having a great day, I'm trying to laugh, I'm trying to joke around, I want that same energy. If you're gonna cry, go outside. You know what I mean? So that was the only rule that I had. But I had friends that would take me to my chemo appointments. People would come help around the house, especially with both of us being sick, technically at the same time. But I definitely had a great support system, and I didn't really tell friends until after my surgery. I think a few people knew at work, but I posted once we found out we were pregnant, we had a new house, and I was going through chemo. So that's when most people found out, and they definitely jumped in to help in prayer and that type of thing.
There is a doctor in, I can't remember what country in Africa, but it is said that she found a cure for cancer, and I'm not sure which cancer it was. But do you all see a cure anytime, at least in our lifetime, of cancer?
You know what? I would like to think that there would be a cure. I don't necessarily think it is going to be in our lifetime. I think the medical system is, I wouldn't say a racket, but in a sense a racket. They take care of the things that they want to take care of. It's big money for people to have breast cancer. You think about, I went through chemo. I'm sure it was probably well over $10,000 just for one sitting, and everything that is attributed to cancer is big business. At some point or another, I think they will, but I don't think there's really a big push, because it's making the pharmaceutical companies and doctors rich. I mean, I hate to say that, but I think medicine they put it towards the things they want to put it towards, and then too, it's such a big, like I said, I have very mixed emotions about where our politicians and where things actually are important and where their alliances lie. And sometimes it's not in cures.
Aubery?
Yeah, I think there are some orgs that are trying to push for it. But to Ms. Thompson's point, there's pharmaceutical companies going to make that money. I know. I think one of my medications at the time, just one of the chemo meds, was over $5,000 just by itself, and I think I had 3 at the time. So there's always going to be that. I do work with the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. That's one of I'm doing a campaign with them over the next year. They do put a lot of money into the research, but I don't know when or if there will ever be a cure. I am hoping that there would be, to save families and save lives. I know people do other alternative things as far as food and that type of thing. But to the same point, there's definitely money made not only for breast cancer but other diseases as well. That pharmaceutical companies make. You take one thing and it gives you, something else. So that's always going to be a challenge.
What you say, Tanja, to close out?
I would say early detection saves lives. Schedule your mammogram. Also, and to Aubery's point, women, feel your husband's breasts, because Aubery's life was saved because his wife noticed something. And the theme for my breast cancer event is actually see something, feel something, say something, because that's how things are going to change. And to reduce the stigma of breast cancer, we have to have more conversations like this so that women and men are not dying needlessly because of fear.
Thank you all so much for coming. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your lives and joining me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Tanja, before we leave, after we get off, can you stay on for a second? Aubery, thank you so much. Thank you again. For those of you who don't know, Aubery is not even at home. He agreed to join us, and he is on emergency leave. So we all need to tip of the hat to Aubery, because he could have easily said, Niki, I have family stuff. and he did not. And thank you so much. Now, real quick, Aubery, where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Aubrey Sean, and then Glencamp. And then on Instagram, Big Ace 2000.
Tanja, where can we find you?
Facebook, Tanja S. Thompson, or either Tanja Thompson Speaks. Also, Tanja Thompson Speaks and Tanja S. Thompson on Facebook.
I've been saying Tanja this entire time, and not one time did you say, I'm so sorry. Thank you for coming. And if anybody has any questions for Tanja and Aubery, leave it in the comments. I'll make sure that they see it, and hopefully they can get back. They can get back with you. For this and more, go to my YouTube channel at UnPolitical Politics with Cousin Niki on YouTube, and UPP Cousin Niki on Facebook, and on my Instagram it is UnPolitical Politics. So thank you all again. Breast cancer awareness. Get checked. Early detection is a must. Women, check your men. Men, check your women. Men, check your men. Women, check your women. And just get checked. Really quick. They typically tell you don't get a mammogram until 40. But I've been reading where women have actually, and I'm sorry, I haven't saw anything for men, but women have actually been getting it at a younger age.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of put, because I know for me, I asked about 4 or 5 years ago, I said, can I get a mammogram? And they said, well, you're not 40, so no. So, how do we start pushing for mammograms in our 30s and our 20s?
I think what I'm seeing, because like you said, there are more women, especially young, that are getting breast cancer. And sometimes those women have a history in their family to help. It's usually something that has occurred to trigger them to get breast cancer, and or they feel something. I would say for any woman and any man, if you feel something or you see something, go say something, because if you have to push the envelope, like I said, early detection saved my life, but my doctor discounted me that my lump was actually breast cancer, and she said it was nothing, but I had to push the inside of the envelope. So we have to be advocates for ourselves. We have to be able to access the system. But, we talk a lot about access, but it's actually navigating. How do you navigate the system? How do you navigate when you have all of these barriers that's in front of you to say, no, one, you're too young. Oh, it doesn't run in your family. But so you have to be able to push the inside of the envelope to be able to be heard. And a lot of times that is using, is that cultural competency as well. Because if someone looks like me, I can have a better conversation, sad as it is, with that person, especially when it comes time to when things need to be done. And that's what I even in the military, I had those issues, and I just had to learn how to speak the talk to be able to get the services and what I needed. And that was a mammogram, an ultrasound, a biopsy, even right at age 40. Because even back then, it's only because I was in the military that they were proactive about getting a mammogram. And fortunately, I was able to get it at 40, which was my baseline.
And there you have it. Thank you all again. And I will see you guys in maybe next Friday for Foolery Friday. I don't know yet. It's cuffing season. So for all you cuffers out there, get you a big boy, get you a big girl. It's cuffing season. Next time on Foolery Friday, we will talk about cuffing season and the do's and don'ts and the must-haves and the must-not-haves. Also, the gray sweatpants. It's your time, guys. Take care. and have a good day.
UnPolitical Politics, hosted by Cousin Niki. It's the king of the zoo. Young Ward, yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. You know the vibes, ayy. You know the vibes, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, yeah.